everyone has had a good, productive day. This day has been long and weird, just in the things that have taken place. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. You guys can see I'm bloated. There's no point in hiding it. I have a lot of fluid that I need to get off. And my schedule getting back into the United States has been a fuckfest. So trying to incorporate the show on a schedule that is unlike what I was beforehand. So beforehand, this is total tangent. Before I left on the trip, I was doing home treatments. I cannulated myself, essentially did treatments at home. And so if I needed to do a treatment at 1 in the morning, I did a treatment at 1 in the morning. If I needed to do one at 3 in the evening because of whatever, I did one at 3 in the evening. And so there was never really an issue of massive gains, not normally, nor was there an issue of time scale. You did one when you need one. Well, getting back into the United States, I don't have that luxury anymore. So now it becomes trying to get a schedule around a job schedule. It's not necessarily, it hasn't been the easiest thing to accomplish. Let's say it that way. So, but there's that. I may take a few days off next week in order to get that squared away. But we'll see. We'll play it by ear. But that said, the thing I wanted to talk about in this video was Tulsi. Oh, I know what I was saying. This was a weird day. So, the doctor's appointment, get that out of the way. And we get back home. We're in the room. My wife and I are preparing to do the patron appreciation. I am in the room. And she's out there doing something. I don't know what she's doing. The dog comes into the room. I'm trying to get the dog out of the room. She tries to help, calls. The dog shoots out of the room, grabbing the television and the light, taking it with him out of the room, slamming the TV to the ground. The TV has like this crack in it. When I look at the TV down, there's like a crack going through the television. Then my wife, she gets here, she gets ready to do the show. We're just about to go on. A minute before going on, she gets sick to the stomach, she throws up and goes. At that point, patron appreciation goes out the window. So it's been this kind of just weird day of odd stuff taking place. Nevertheless, it's nearly 8 in the evening. It's soapbox after dark. I'm wide awake. Can't sleep. I mean, granted, I wouldn't be sleeping at 8 o'clock anyway, but you get my point. And when real men can't sleep, real men do the news. One of the things that's in the news has to do with the presidential elections, meaning the primaries for the Democratic side anyway. And so these guys have been trying to find any mic that they can get in front of that would give them any level of buzz to invigorate their campaign. Tulsi Gabbard is also one of those people. What's more interesting about Tulsi Gabbard is she's willing to have that conversation with pretty much anybody. So she's been showing up on Fox News. Well, the first time she showed up on Fox News, she was having a conversation with Brett Baer. Second time, I don't know who this guy is, Leland somebody, if I'm not mistaken. But she gets into this back and forth with a Fox News host on the issue of foreign policy. Yes, I love that. Because I like her defending her position. Because I want her position to be well known. And the only way her position will be well known is if she has to defend her position. I don't want it to be nonsense attacks, but I love it when she gets to separate the wheat from the chaff. And she gets to explain why she takes a certain policy. And in some way, in her explaining it, forcing you to come up with the logic of why she's wrong. And in most of these cases, they have been unable to do just that. In some of these cases, comically so. Brett Baer trying to score points for Donald Trump. It's like, so you're trying to say that Donald Trump is doing everything right with the exception of his foreign policy with the other stuff. Missing the point that his foreign policy with the other stuff is instrumental to the fact that he's getting it wrong. Nevertheless, let's hear this. Let's hear the back and forth between Tulsi Gabbard and the Fox News host. We will gain something from it either way. So let's hear her out.
Four-term Hawaii Congresswoman and Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard joining us from the state of New Hampshire. You're going to spend a long time up there over the next year or so. Good to see you.
Aloha, Leland. Good to talk to you.
All right. Happy Easter to you and yours. As we look at this,
Same to
you
you.
put out a statement that said it is time to move on beyond this divisive issue. Read into that. Is it time to stop talking about impeachment?
Well, look, I supported the Mueller investigation because it's an important question about if or whether or not the president colluded with a foreign country to interfere in our election. The conclusion that came from that Mueller report was that no collusion took place. Now is the time for us to come together as a country to put the issues and the interests and the concerns that the American people have at the forefront and take action to bring about real solutions for them.
Brings up an interesting...
I'm running for president now. I don't think that we should defeat Donald Trump through impeachment. I think it's really important for us in this country to come together and have the American people vote to take Donald Trump out of office in 2020. I'm running for president to bring values of service.
I am sorry to interrupt her, but that is dramatically important to understand. God, that is dramatically important to understand. I want her to say that 1,000 times. I want to take Trump out of office at the ballot. I don't want to take him out through some kind of, a fringe constitutional measure. No, I want him to lose. This has been a divisive issue for the country, for the most part, with a section of the country that has been embracing a conspiracy theory and doesn't want to let it go. Her point is, I want to move beyond this. I want to beat Trump at the ballot box. I want it to be a fair political contest, not some kind of measure. I mean, right off the bat, the Mueller thing in and of itself was some way of trying to get Trump out of office without going through the ballot box. Think about it. If Mueller would have came back with any level of collusion, didn't matter whether it was legit or not, it could have been a bullshit reason, Donald Trump and the political wind would have been completely against him and getting him out of that office, even Republicans. This was a witch hunt. This was them trying to take the head of the president and what would have been a soft coup. Mueller didn't come through for him. He did substantiate this notion of the Russia hack of sorts, but he didn't necessarily come through for them on this issue of collusion. And to take this extra step of, no, there was no collusion. No, the president wasn't concerned about us finding collusion because the collusion didn't exist. So it is impossible for the president to have obstructed justice when there was no there. He wasn't trying to prevent you from defining something that didn't exist. His issue was that he looked at it as a political witch hunt. I'm fucked, is what he said, because he looked at it as, I haven't colluded with Russia. But they don't care whether I colluded with Russia or not. They're coming after me. I am fucked. Anybody would have thought that. Had nothing to do with guilt. It had everything to do with what looked like the makings of a purely ideological hunt. They wanted the head of the president. Tulsi is right. Look, man, on one issue after the next, Tulsi is on point. And this is one of those issues where she's on point. The logic of it makes all the sense in the world. Let him keep going. The idea that you're going to take the president down, though, however, on obstruction for something that didn't exist, good luck with that. Good luck with that. You may get the people who you're affiliated with to go through with that. But good luck with trying to sell that to the public itself. Half of the public thinks this is a witch hunt. Good luck.
Service above self to the forefront, to the White House. Once again, so we are focusing on the interests of the American people first.
That's interesting because that's what Dana Perino said on Friday, that she thought would be an interesting lane for any Democratic candidate to try and take on. Are you worried that the more the Democrats talk about impeachment, the more it helps President Trump with his re-election bid, a la the impeachment process against Bill Clinton ended up with him having the highest approval ratings he ever had?
You know what I'm worried about is the continued divisiveness and putting partisan political interests ahead of the interests of the people, rather than recognizing, as I heard from someone who came to a town hall we had here last night in Exeter, who talked about how his family continues to struggle with the cost of health care, how he, as a middle-class family, he and his wife working as public school teachers, struggle just to make ends meet every single day. And he feels like their challenges and their concerns are not being heard because of this hyper-partisanship and divisiveness that we're seeing in a Washington that's disconnected from the challenges they're facing in their lives. That's what we need to be focusing on.
When you look at these conversations, don't look at these conversations as just two human beings talking about something. That's not what's taking place. Tulsi Gabbard has a political position that she wants to get out. Whatever's asked of her, some of the questions she's going to be willing to answer because it helps her get her political position out. And questions that she's listening to that don't allow her to get that position out, or that puts her in territory that she doesn't necessarily want to go into, she diverges. She diverges in a way that's natural, that makes all the sense in the world, but it's a divergent. If she wanted to answer that question straight out, the answer was yes and no. In some cases, yes, you're going to have a section of the population that looks at this as an entirety of a witch hunt, and that is going to be against you on this. Let's say there might be 40% of the population. Let's say there might be 30%. That is a large chunk of the country that is utterly and entirely against you. Some are going to be apathetic. Some may be for it. Her point is, this is not the way that you want to pull this off. That's all. It's an entirely divisive issue. And it's somewhat of an unnecessary divisive issue. And so she changes the subject. I don't want, I'm saying this poorly, but the answer is yes and no. Bill Clinton had more political charisma than Donald Trump. So Bill Clinton could wear an impeachment. Not to mention, they were going after the guy for a blowjob. I mean, let's be honest. So that looks bad just on its face. This looks like a witch hunt. This is a witch hunt. Like, that's why Bill Clinton was able to leave this with 70% approval rating. Donald Trump is a grotesque political figure, however. He's not going to get a 70% approval rating out of this, even though you may have a section of the public that looks at this and says this was nonsense, on the left and on the right. So she could answer that in a straight way. You get kind of yes and no, but her point in this interview is not just to give wishy-washy answers. Her point is, I have a political disposition that I want to get across, and at any opportunity I want to get it across, I'm going to get it across. Questions that don't allow me to do so, I'm going to try to go around it. But let her keep going. I like her answers.
Okay, so, well, that's not a no in terms of the concern that impeachment might help President Trump. I want to bring you to the issue of this bombing in Sri Lanka. Unquestionably terrible. Unquestionably, it's been condemned. We hear that all the time from the U.S. government. You have a unique foreign policy of sort of pulling back on American intervention around the world. How would that play out in a situation like with the Sri Lanka bombings?
Well, first of all,
Good question. Good question. Yes, good question. Man, the Fox News audience is hyper reactive, terrified of the world. So these are the questions that are going to continuously come up. Yes, you're going to get these questions on like MSNBC and everything else, but definitely on Fox News. Like, this seems to be where they land on all of the interviews that I've seen them do with her. They end up on foreign policy. And I love this question. What does your foreign policy look like for something like this that takes place? Now, it presupposes that America has to do anything at all. This is not America that was bombed. This has nothing to do with us. I have no idea why we would have anything to do with it one way or the other outside of sending our prayers and if there's anything we could do to help. But nevertheless, fair enough. It's Fox News. America runs the world. What do you do, Tulsi Gabbard, with this bombing that has taken place?
Like people all across this country, our hearts and prayers are with the people of Sri Lanka during this terrible tragedy of this terrorist attack that has taken hundreds of people's lives and left many hundreds more injured and wounded. When we look to our foreign policy, we can see how there are many problems that need to be addressed. If the intelligence reports that are coming out around this terrorist attack in Sri Lanka are proven to be true, and the investigation is ongoing to see who is actually responsible, but the early intelligence reports point to a terrorist group in Sri Lanka that adheres to this same most extreme, exclusivist and intolerant form of Islam that fuels terrorist
but if America pulls
organizations
back
like
around the
Al-Qaeda
world from
and
taking these
ISIS.
groups on, if America pulls back from taking these groups on, doesn't it just allow more attacks like this?
We need to take the threat of terrorism very seriously. As a soldier, I enlisted after the attacks on 9/11 to take on these terrorist groups who attacked us and who took thousands of American lives. Soldiers, service members, people across the country who enlisted after 9/11 take this threat very seriously, which is why we are so offended and angered by actions that this administration has taken to cozy up to and to support the interests of countries like Saudi Arabia, who are the #1 propagator of this very same ideology that fuels terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
I think it's fair to say that the Saudis have cracked down on Wahhabism
around the world.
So one thing that I just want to inject in this, he's pushing her on this, and he's interrupting her. It's slightly dickish. But that part aside, I like the conversation, the back and forth, and the way that it's going. But he's pushing her. He's pushing her on this. If America pulls back, doesn't that mean that these guys are going to be more pervasive? Meaning, don't you give them a free pass if America doesn't run the world? Now, her response to this looked like she was somewhat rattled by this. And she went to this thought of, look, I was a soldier. I know what it means to enlist and so forth. But I think she's missing just one basic point. We're propagating some of this. Like, maybe not necessarily exactly explicitly the Sri Lanka thing, but I'm just saying, especially when you get into this idea of Iraq and Syria and the countries of the Middle East, our foreign policy propagates this behavior around the world, particularly if you go back to like the Soviet Union and us radicalizing elements in Afghanistan in order to fight the Soviet Union. Like, we have a long history of instigating ourselves into the affairs of those nations and having horrendous consequences as a result of our foreign policy. So, you know, it's like this thing of, if we pull back, doesn't it make it worse? Well, also there's a situation of us involving ourselves also making it worse. Let's be very clear. Our friends, our allies in the regions of the world, when you're talking about Saudi Arabia, when you're talking about Israel, it produces certain results in the various countries. Let's be very clear that our foreign policy has an effect on the wider world. But she gets pushed away from this. But let's let her finish. Let's let her defend herself.
Saudis have cracked down on Wahhabism in a pretty significant way. You, on the other hand, have gone and met with Bashar Assad and said the U.S. should essentially try to take our boot off his neck.
I want to correct you on this. The Saudis have not cracked down on the spread of Wahhabism. They continue to spend billions of dollars spreading this ideology around the world, which is providing this fertile recruiting ground, which is fueling terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It is a country that continues to provide direct and indirect support to terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in Yemen. Could you try to answer my question about Assad? I want to stop.
I understand that we can disagree on the issue of we can disagree on the issue.
We are talking about this administration.
What about Iran? Should we have our foot on the neck of Iran?
You asked me to come here to share my views on these issues. I'm trying to share them, and you're not allowing me to do so, and that's unfortunate because these are issues that threaten the safety and security of the American people. You made a statement that is false about Saudi Arabia, and it speaks directly to actions.
His statement about Saudi Arabia is false. Let's be very clear. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He's either being disingenuous or he is lying. What Tulsi Gabbard is saying here is absolutely right. They do put billions into the spread of Wahhabism. She's not blind to this. This isn't necessarily secret or hidden information. This is somewhat well known. He's either lying or he's being disingenuous. And either way, even if you disagree with her on this, you asked her a question and you're not allowing her to give you the answer to the question that you asked. She's giving you she's not hiding any of her political positions. She's telling you exactly what you want to know. You're not giving her a goddamn chance to answer. She's like, it's unfortunate. And he's like, yes, asshole, it's unfortunate. She's trying to give you her political opinion. You asked her what she thinks and you're not giving her a chance to answer. That's such a pain in the ass way of doing an interview. If you disagree with her on what you're saying, let her talk. Have this conversation, this back and forth that you seem to be trying to stew up or gin up for some whatever reason. And it does seem like he's trying to protect Donald Trump, which is probably why he's trying to protect Saudi Arabia. But he is lying to his audience in the process of doing so.
That this administration has taken in continuing to support the interests of Saudi Arabia, continuing to take
you've
sides
made,
in
ma'am,
this
you've made your point about Saudi Arabia. Let's move on to Iran. Ma'am, you've made your point about Saudi Arabia. Let's move on to Iran. Should the United States have its boot on the neck of the Iranian regime that supports terror all around the world, or not? Because you have a policy of taking our boot off the neck of one of Iran's closest allies, which is Bashar Assad. So with respect to Iran, yes or no, should the United States be tough on them and continue to try to force regime change?
First of all, let me be clear about you are completely twisting and misconstruing my policies, and you're not really giving me the chance to convey clearly what they are. When we're talking about terrorists, who attacked us on 9/11? The majority of those who attacked us on 9/11, did they come from Iran?
All but one came from Saudi Arabia.
Did they?
I said all but one came from Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. That is my point exactly.
Well, who killed all the Marines in the Beirut barracks?
No,
if you want to go terror attack for terror attack, we can.
You're not
answering the question.
Okay. Points here. I am very clearly answering your questions, but you continue to try to divert away from the facts and the truth that I'm presenting to you and to your viewers about the threats that face us in this country.
It's tough. I asked you a specific question. I asked you a specific question about Iran. We didn't get an answer. We got to leave it there. We appreciate it. Thank you for being here. We'll have you back anytime.
Have a great day.
Should the United States involve itself in regime change wars? Meaning, should it be the United States' responsibility to take down the government of another country if for whatever reason the United States doesn't like that government? That's essentially what you're asking. Should the government, or should the United States, have the moral authority and use military force in order to kill, murder, slaughter, institute wars, institute a dictator if it deems necessary to do so? Do we really have that level of moral authority? Is America really the country that's supposed to be or should be making those decisions? And doesn't a country doing that puts you in perpetual war? Meaning, it is impossible to take the position that we need to get or have less war while simultaneously taking a policy that will force more war. What an asshole. What an utterly ridiculous asshole. This idea that people who are signing up to the military, that they're really signing up for people like this to get over here and say, yes, we want to send your kids, your uncles, your dads, your mothers, your sisters, we want to send them off to war for some unspecific means because the United States believes it has the sole moral authority to decide what government should exist and what governments shouldn't. I don't care if you like or dislike the government of Iran. It is none of your business. In fact, what the matter is, the behavior that the United States takes within response to Iran makes utter no sense when you look at what Saudi Arabia looks like. Do you realize Saudi Arabia has been beheading people and be putting heads on spikes? These are our allies. This is the guy who's having a conversation about the Saudis talking about they've been cracking down Wahhabism. They have a theocratic sopranoist regime. And you're going to tell me about Iran? Get out of here. Get out of here. No, the United States should not be involving itself in changing the regimes of other nations. It is none of our business. It puts us in perpetual war. You have to be somewhat of a goofball and utterly detached from the consequences of your actions to even come to this conclusion after Iraq and after Libya. What horrible, disgusting people these are. For fuck's sake. I want to end this because this video wasn't intended to be long, even though this video has gone longer. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. It's fucking aggravating. Like, watching that video is aggravating. I have to monitor the words that are coming out of my mouth. That's how aggravating that video is. But I would end it here. She did her best in treacherous territory. Say it that way. Thanks all. Bye-bye.